In the history of the English Bible, one version stands head and shoulders above all others in importance, the King James. The language of the King James has saturated spoken English for 400 years. For many people in our culture, the King James Bible is in fact synonymous with the Bible, to the point where some people will not recognize any other translation as valid, or even hold up the King James Version as somehow uniquely inspired or uniquely inerrant compared to all other translations. Now this is ludicrous, because the King James Bible is a very significant and very beautiful version, but it is also very, very flawed, with perhaps the most troubled history of any English translation in history. Let's take a look. A version of the Bible is generally seen to be more accurate the closer to the original manuscripts that it is. So the more times that the text has been copied, revised, translated, or edited since the original authors wrote it down, then the less accurate it's going to be. The more likely it is to have errors, and the more problematic trusting that version is. I talk about this more fully in a video on the manuscripts behind our modern Bible. See link in the description below. Most modern versions are based directly on what is known as the critical text, which is a careful recreation of the original text based on the earliest and best text that we have. Most people assume that the King James Version is basically the same, that it is one step removed from the most original manuscripts that we have. But that's not at all what happened. In fact, the King James Version isn't really a translation at all. It's a revision. The editors themselves say this right in the original introduction to the 1611 King James Version. They said, "From the beginning, we were never intending to make a new translation, but to make a good one better." This is reinforced in the very first rule of translation that was made to guide the people who were editing the King James Version. 1. The ordinary Bible in the church, commonly called the Bishop's Bible, is to be followed and as little altered as the original will permit. The King James was meant to improve on what was already in use, not create something new. The Puritans, a rival faction to the Church of England, were using a version of the Bible called the Geneva Bible, which was insanely popular, but also rabidly anti-monarch and anti-establishment, especially in its commentary. In order to regain control of the text and meaning of the Bible, as well as undercut the Puritans' support, the King of England commissioned the King James Version as a compromise between the two positions. In reality, this compromise was meant to cement the power of the Church of England, because this new version of the Bible was basically just the Bishop's Bible that the Church of England had already been using, with a fresh coat of paint put on it. Politics was at the heart of the creation of the King James Version, and unfortunately, it gets worse, because the Bishop's Bible wasn't an original translation either, but is based on the Great Bible, the first English Bible to be commissioned to be used in the Church of England. The Great Bible, in turn, was an amalgam of two other versions, Miles Coverdale's and William Tyndale's, of which Coverdale was just a revision of Tyndale. Tyndale's was the first and only original translation from the Greek and Hebrew in all of this. In fact, William Tyndale's version was the first English translation of the Bible to be printed ever. And estimates are that the King James Version keeps between 70 and 90% of Tyndale's words. This is particularly ironic since the King James Version, based on Tyndale's work, became the authorized version for England, the very government that had executed Tyndale for making that translation 75 years earlier. The KJV's game of biblical telephone doesn't end there either. The Greek text that Tyndale and everyone after him relied upon was compiled by a man named Erasmus. While revolutionary for his time, Erasmus' text was based on only a handful of fairly modern Greek texts that had been handed down in the East for centuries, copy upon copy upon copy being made. And this includes one manuscript that had been made specifically for him to include. Now that is a lot of revisions, translations, edits, and copies to go from the original to the King James Version. But the last bit of revelation gets even worse. See, Erasmus didn't have the last few verses of Revelation in any of his copies of the New Testament. And so because he was in a rush to get his version printed before his rivals, what he did is he took the Latin Vulgate, translated it back into Greek, and included that in his manuscript. So, from John originally writing down the end of Revelation to it appearing in the King James Version, this is the lineage. Original text, copying and transmission in Greek, translated into Old Latin, edited and translated into proper Latin by Jerome, edited into the official Latin Vulgate, translated back into Greek by Erasmus, translated into English by Tyndale, revised by Coverdale, edited into the Great Bible, then the Bishop's Bible, finally re-edited yet again to become the King James Version. Before we jump to destroy them, however, the people who made the King James Version did not see themselves as starting something from scratch, nor did they see themselves as stealing other people's work. The introduction to the original KJV includes this line, "Nothing is begun and perfected at the same time." So we build upon their foundation that went before us, and being helped by their labors, do endeavor to make that better which they left so good, and they, we persuade ourselves, if they were alive, would thank us. I love that sentiment. They saw the best Bible translations as being part of a tradition of improving upon what had come before them, of working towards perfection, not having achieved it themselves. And in that pursuit, they succeeded. The King James Version was significantly more beautiful, significantly more accurate, significantly better version than the Bibles in English that had come before it. But that is not to say it was without error. The 1613 edition, 2 years after the original, included 400 significant revisions to the original Bible. As more ancient manuscripts of the Bible have been uncovered, numerous other errors of the King James Version have become apparent. See a link in the description for a video that deals more fully with textual variants. This is not to mention how far the English language itself has shifted in the last 400 years. For example, in King James English, to allege something meant to prove it. And conversation was somebody's behavior, ideas that have almost completely flipped their meaning in contemporary English. Changes in our understanding of Scripture itself and changes in the English language have both rendered the meaning of the King James Version today to be quite inaccurate. When added to the political motivations and machinations involved in its creation, the poor textual foundation, and the extreme distance between the original versions and the King James itself, this is about the last version of the Bible that anyone should possibly want to claim as perfect. The King James Version was great for its time, but not today. Just like Tyndale's translation was revolutionary for its time, but not today. Both have become obsolete because culture and language shift over time to make what was clear and transparent opaque. And new discoveries of more ancient and better manuscripts of the Bible mean that we can make more accurate, better translations with almost every single generation. And the original creators of the King James Version would have agreed. They did not see themselves as creating something new or perfect or even necessarily that lasting. They saw themselves as refining what had been passed on to them, something that was the responsibility of every generation to come. The KJV translators rightly saw the English Bible not as something that was created back then in perfection, but something that is continually being improved as we get new information, becoming more accurate, more understandable, continually being reinvigorated and reapplied for every generation. We are part of the story of the Bible, and we have a role to play in making sure that our generation's understanding of Scripture is the most accurate, most understandable, best version we possibly can. That is exactly what the KJV editors did in their day and expected us to continue doing today. And some people have done exactly that. In 1870, the American Standard Version was begun based on the King James Version. Then the Revised Standard Version and the New American Standard Version were both based on the ASV. Finally, today we have the New Revised Standard Version as the torchbearer for the lineage of translation that goes all the way back to William Tyndale. An unbroken line from the earliest English version of the Bible printed to one that we have and use and is relevant today. Each of these versions has attempted to improve upon what was already good, to take the best scholarship and the best information of the day and revise what was in front of them to make the most accurate, best translation possible for that time period. That is what we should all be striving for, not relying on the past to give us all of the answers wrapped up in a single translation. Something which everyone involved in that long line of translators stretching back to William Tyndale would yell, "No!" As always, thank you for watching. Have a wonderful day. See you next video.